Chapter 4. Hijack. The Hansen slowed its orbit, decelerating so fast it seemed to jump into the upper atmosphere. The shuttle slowly made its descent into the thick atmosphere. It was not as rough as flight in the days before the space colony era, but all the same, the passengers were strapped into their seats and had to endure a fair amount of vibration. Humans who live in space, spacenoids, who were used to spaceflight, hated flying through atmosphere. Their comfort for spaceflight only increased their anxiety for flying through air. It's because that thing they call air is flowing. It's much worse than in space. That was Kenneth's and the other pro-pilots' evaluation of flight on Earth. As long as there were no obstacles, the uniform vacuum of space promised stable flight. To space pilots, that was the central principle of spaceflight. Kenneth squinted at the blue sea 1,000 meters below. He guessed at the origin of the vibration in the fuselage. If he didn't think of anything, the vibration would just continue to gnaw at him until it was unbearable. It looks like two strange objects are flying, he thought. They slid from below, flowing upward. Looks like an older craft. That was all he had in mind the moment something with the same silhouette cut across his window. Kenneth had an uneasy feeling. "Oh no!" A slightly hysterical voice rose from ahead. It was that girl, Gigi's voice. "What?" the young man asked from across an empty seat. That was the second time the young man called to Kenneth. He tightly gripped the computer terminal with both hands. "Huh?" Kenneth didn't understand the meaning of his question or what Gigi said. Dwa! Suddenly a violent vibration shook the cabin. "Ay!" "Ooh!" the adult screamed. As Kenneth's seatbelt dug into his thigh, he saw one of the minister's wives' body crash into the ceiling and fall back down. A shockwave? Kenneth guessed that the Hansen was rocked by the supersonic wave created by the unknown craft racing by. The vibration subsided, but there was no sign that things would quiet down. "What? Stand fast!" As voices rose from the center of the cabin, Kenneth tried to see what was happening outside. He couldn't spot any aircraft out of the narrow shipside windows. It looked like a base jabber-type frame, but... "Where is that ship from?" the young man in the next seat asked. "I don't know, but here it comes." Another ship swept by from the front diagonal to the back. There was nothing written on its flat base jabber-type hull that would indicate where it was from. The thickly painted dark green fuselage was covered in rust. The rough treatment of the craft was obvious. The front glass looked like it had never been cleaned. "Shockwave incoming!" Kenneth shouted into the cabin. "What?" It was a near miss, but it looks like they noticed and are coming back. They noticed? The young man moved to the seat next to Kenneth. "Purser, what is the situation?" Kenneth turned to the back of the cabin, shifting to a military tone. The young man leaned forward to the window and saw part of a ship disappear to the rear of the Hansen. It proceeded to crash into the ship. "It appears to be pursuing the Hansen." Kenneth stood up. "What's wrong?" Without answering, Kenneth left for the passage. As the Hansen was tossed by the shockwave, up and down, left and right, Kenneth stretched out both arms, grabbed a seat, and braced himself. Another passenger's body, a cabinet minister, bounced off the ceiling. "Hold that lady down!" Kenneth's order was drowned out by the screams of middle-aged women. The lady's body that had crashed into the ceiling floated up and crashed down again. "Purser, get into the cockpit!" "Captain Kenneth?" The young bartender exited the hatch from the lounge, trying to gain control, when suddenly he grabbed the intercom on the wall. Crash! There was another crash, but Kenneth held on to the seat and stopped himself from flying, the product of his considerable military training. The purser, on the other hand, crashed into the ceiling, ripping the intercom cord out of the wall. "Ooh!" His voice, a mixture of a scream and a moan, filled the cabin. "Where is that craft from?" The young man slid into the seat next to Kenneth, looked out the window and caught a glance of the wing of the unknown ship before it once again hid behind the Hansen. "It's a hijacking. It's not clear what their intention is yet, but they are not trying to shoot us down. Relax." An announcement from the captain of the Hansen played, then stopped. The young man made an enigmatic expression and saw the purser stand up. He watched the blonde girl, stiff-faced, rush into the passage with a first aid kit to help the woman who crashed into the ceiling. The voice before must have been that girl, Gigi, right? The young man looked at Gigi's seat, but he saw nothing there but an empty seat belt, still fastened. The young man quickly moved to his original seat and put on his seatbelt. He stared at the blonde girl crouching in the corridor, attempting to push the lady's round legs, which were protruding from an armrest, into a seat. Kenneth, who was by the hatch connecting to the cockpit at the front, couldn't see it. Crash! The impact this time was biggest, and what was worse, the longest. Ah! The blonde girl in Hathaway's field of vision floated high in the wide corridor and then crashed down on the ceiling, and then into the next seat backing. She dropped, landing on her side. The blonde girl shrank down and then bounced, seat to seat, toward the young man. The young man raised his arms and caught the girl's body, her stomach covering his face. "Are you okay?" I think so." "It's probably better if you sit." The young man lowered Mace Flower into the chair to the right of his. Mace, gasping deeply, sat in the seat next to his. Her hair was all over the place, and her cheeks had lost their color. "Seatbelt? That's right. Yeah, thanks." Mace used both hands to check her body to see if there was anything wrong. "Looks like I just got boxed around." As Mace rested her head on the seat back, she glanced at the young man, but he did not have time to return the glance. "What is that? That sound?" The young man noticed the sound coming from the rear of the cabin. A clattering sound of metal on metal seemed to start around the time he laid Mace's body in the seat next to his. "The rear airlock?" Mace asked, not even able to raise her head from the seat back. "Are you kidding me? Those mufti bastards!" It was Kenneth. He leapt through the hatch connected to the cockpit, pistol in hand, and ran toward the lounge. "Captain, wait! Cabinet Minister Einstein, it's Mufti Aaron. They're trying to board the ship." The cabinet minister, sitting in a seat behind the young man, stopped Kenneth. "If that is true, throw your gun away. The Hansen has too many cabinet ministers aboard." The cabinet minister grabbed Captain Kenneth by the wrist. As the young man listened to their conversation, he took off his seatbelt. "Mufti is trying to seize the Hansen of all things." Kenneth shook free of the cabinet minister's hand and walked past Hathaway toward the lounge. "At this high altitude? Ridiculous. Our altitude is below 6,000 meters. Besides, this spaceship has a perfect airlock, so it has no effect on the cabin. They can get in." Kenneth's voice moved behind Hathaway. "That is correct. Captain Kenneth, put down your gun and throw it here. Slide it across the floor." That voice seemed to come from the direction of the lounge. "Don't look," the young man said, sensing Mace's head moving next to him. "It's better not to make eye contact with hijackers." To the young man's side, he could see Kenneth starting to retreat to the cockpit. "The gun! Pass it here!" The voice giving that order was slightly muffled. Next to the young man, Kenneth lowered the gun and slid it across the floor. The young man, not moving his head, watched the movement of Kenneth's arm and stern face. He tried to predict the hijacker's next move. The animal-like eye moments of the young man noticed Kenneth backing away. Kenneth raised his hands and backed away further. "Well done, Captain." The hijacker picked up Kenneth's pistol and tucked it under his ammunition belt. He held a submachine gun in this right hand, pointing it at Kenneth. "Earth Federation Cabinet Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I am Mufti Aaron." The reason the voice of the man who made that declaration was muffled was shown by what he was wearing on his face. A pumpkin mask, like one you would wear at Halloween.